So I just thought, because there's been some really big themes that have come through in the conversation over the last 2 days. And I think one of the big themes that I've heard is about the democratization of how do we involve different stakeholders in this ambitious project, which is to, in a very short amount of time, change the world as we know it. And what role might the arts and culture have in that? And I think from Dorothea's presentation, there's something quite profound that the arts can offer. Really interesting to kind of think about the trappedness, the locked-in nature of how we've evolved our cultural heritage and institutions, but then to develop a new philosophy of doing. And I just thought I'd quickly highlight there's 9 thoughts that Julie's Bicycle, having worked in this for 12 years, is seeing how that transformation might have. And the first is just to see that culture is an ecosystem. And I think it's interesting to think, I think people outside the sector and the audiences don't understand all the parts that play a part in that, so developing that. And then the creative content will thrive under positive conditions. So how this last 2 days has felt really positive, and really the sense of the possible and the imagination and the can-do. The thoughts of the challenges of the how and the what and the when and the time frames and the funding that might support that. But I think if we can think about the positive conditions, that will be critical. Then I think really importantly, which Stefan, is the focus on purpose. So the 1.5 degree and the Sustainable Development Goals, as I talked yesterday, are really abstract, but there's lots of richness and really useful tools in them, and they're really important things. So the arts in service of that purpose, and in everything that we do, if we want to rise to that challenge, and we may, as a community, decide that it is the impossible. But I think we owe it to our other people around the planet that are not as fortunate as we might be here in Switzerland and respectively around Europe, but thinking about how to kind of translate that. Then there's this like interest in that, and again this theme came up a lot, like talking about knowledge and exchange and information, and how do we build the evidence. And I think at Julie's Bicycle we found, making the case for this has been a journey and a process, and that relationship between arts and environment has been not always immediate. People don't necessarily see, well, the arts doesn't actually materially have a big carbon impact. It has something that it needs to do about it. And we had someone worked with the UN who said, every activity, whether it's a personal or individual or within your organization, if you feel you're exempt, that exemption has to be, if you really feel connected and think that the climate change and the environment is so critical, then that exemption that you're giving, that free pass, you have to really justify it. And yesterday we talked, and it has been a common theme, is talking about the importance of our value set, and how our values and shaping those will help us kind of in our relationship with nature. And then just to quickly go through just a couple other things, which I think has been fantastic about this Verbier, and so many of the projects and initiatives that I've learned about has been around the support and learning and development of the skills and facilitation and exchange of good practice. What does good look like? What does, as Stefan just talked about, touring and going and working with your receiving house, what does that materially look like? But how can we be bigger? One thing which when in a second talking about panel, and what if we were all to come here in 10 years' time, what might we want our sector to look like, and the audiences and the public from Verbier that are here today, what would you want and expect from the arts to be? So maybe just think about that. And then the need for collaboration and partnerships, and I think Verbier and Summit and other initiatives that we're often involved in are so important in like not keeping into those silos. And then the championing and empowering leadership, and I think that's also been, we've talked a lot about youth and their part to play and their representation and their voice, but there's other leadership, and Adrian's talk also thinking about who whose voice is there and how do we give that space. And so leadership, as you know, and I think maybe Dorothea might say something, but we've had quite a hierarchical leadership in our arts institutions, and what we're asking is a complete disruption. And there's a project with one of the major arts institutions that we're working, and that's going to be interesting for them to really think about how do they disrupt when they might have been quite hierarchical. And then the last two quick things that I think have also come is how to advocate the role of culture as a driver for climate action. And Christina, when talking about, Christina, there you go, is the policy world really understanding, as we said, we don't want art to be instrumental and just a mouthpiece for these social messages, but how can the arts really be seen as not just the window dressing, the nice kind of music concert, the art that might be around the conference hall at these climate talks, but really be at the table kind of contributing and feeding into that conversation. And then the last piece of this is just that celebrating. You know, this is something that we've really learned at Julie's Bicycle, is that on this journey it can be really enriching and catalyzing, but sometimes we don't give enough space to actually kind of have a moment of like success and sharing, and that is really important. So that's like some of my thoughts of both kind of all the conversations that I've been involved in through the conference, but also the perspective that Julie's Bicycle, having been kind of working in the sustainability space for a long time. So.
Thank you so much. Whoa. Whoa.